Hey guys, it's Peyton and today I want to talk about everything that I read in June. I read 5 books in June, which I read 7 in May, so I'm a little bit sad. But I will say I did do some traveling throughout June. It was my birthday, I went to the beach, I did some things. I was a little busy. Ow, my cat's biting me. She's sitting by my legs and she's like really cute right now, but she likes to grab onto my arm and give me like a little nibble and then like a kiss, and it's really sweet. This is her right now. She's bathing in the sun. Ignore my athletic shorts, like I wanted to look cute for the video, you know? She's with my pile of books right here, so she's ready to talk about the books. So I read 5 books, and the crazy part about it is while I may have not read as many as I hoped to, the quality was over the quantity. Out of the 5 books I read, 4 of them were 5-star reads, which is kind of insane. And they were like all back to back. I feel like my radar for good books is kind of broken now. Like, is everything I'm ever gonna read gonna be good? Like, something was in the air. And even the other book was a 4 stars. I will say I rate all her entertainment usually, but a 5 stars now is harder to get for me. Like, that is a ultimate 5-star new favorite book of all time situation. The first one that I read was Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. This was the one I gave 4 out of 5 stars, so you kind of know where the direction that this video is going from now on. I really loved this book as well. I picked this up specifically because it's a North Carolina author. It's an adult romance with 2 women. It was set in North Carolina. And one of the characters won the lottery, and what she decided to do with her lottery money was buy a flower farm off of Facebook Marketplace. And this girl right here, Pepper, she already lives at the flower farm and she kind of works there, and for her to buy it, she's like, bro, what? Like, this is my job, like, what are you doing to me? So it starts off a little nasty because she kind of just bought this place and she was not aware of this happening. So I attended a webinar with this author that my library was doing, and I wish she had come physically. I missed a book signing like a week before, so I feel really stupid about that because it would have been really easy for me to go, but you know, in the future. And this author was really, really cool. I hadn't read the book yet when I had attended the webinar, but I really enjoyed her personality. I want to support her. So here we are. I read the book. It was great. It had chronic migraine representation, which I have chronic migraines. I have chronic headaches, everything. I have all of it. All of the chronic head pain. I got it. So I definitely appreciated that because I really have not read a lot of books that represent that level of pain and how it just completely wipes you out forever for multiple days. And I appreciated it, and I really liked how the other character handled the girl in severe pain because, you know, it is a pain that you can't see. So a lot of people like to act like it's not real, and it drives me nuts. But it was a cute romance. I thought it could be cheesy at times. There's some cringy lines here and there, so be aware of that before reading this. But you know, I had a good time. It wasn't a new favorite of all time for me, and that's the only reason it wasn't a 5 stars. So it was great, but it just didn't reach that level of great for me. But there's really nothing wrong with it. And I loved the vibes of the flower farm. It was really fun. The next book I read was good. This was so good. I started reading it off of ebook, and I had to physically buy a copy of it because I loved it so much. When that happens, I mean, that's an honor. Like, I could have just kept reading it for free, which I did, but I finished it and I was like, no, I want this book. One, it's gorgeous. I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me, Jameson Shea. This book is gorgeous. Underneath it, also gorgeous. I'm obsessed with it, and there's going to be a sequel, I think, coming out in November. So I want everything about it. They're both beautiful books, and I want to own both of them and have them be together. And this is a book that I really do foresee myself rereading. Like, something like this stunning and beautiful, it was great. But this is a YA horror, so I did take a turn and it kind of changed my mood for the rest of the month. I started out with something cute and sweet and fluffy, and then I went into something dark. So this is about a main character, Lawrence. She is in Paris, France, ballet, and I didn't know a lot about like the ballet world before reading this book, but there's like a lot of hierarchies and like blood, sweat, and tears that goes into ballet. Ballet is beautiful, but everything under the surface is not. Lawrence is, I believe, the only Black girl in the entire ballet, so she's having to work 15,000 times harder just to get to the same spot as her friends, which aren't they friends? They're kind of awful. So her best friend ever that she's grown up with, done all the ballet with, I forget her name, but she has a mother who is super high up in the ballet. She's well respected. So a lot of her role comes from nepotism. Like, she doesn't really earn what she gets. She's not nearly as talented as Lawrence, and yeah, she doesn't have the drive that she's been forced to have, because to be there she has to work so much harder, and she's literal perfection, but no one wants to see it because of how she looks. She doesn't fit their aesthetic vision. Dealing with that, I'm sure for so many years, that eats you up inside. It literally was destroying her. I don't even know how she did it for as long as she did. So when she comes across a river of blood one day, connected to the gods, she makes a bargain with it to give her a form of power that she could use to rise up the ranks in the ballet. But, you know, with every weird bargain that you make with a river of blood, there's going to be some cons. There's going to be some things that happen that maybe aren't that good, or are they good? So I was very invested in this book. I mean, the writing itself is really beautiful. I was constantly highlighting stuff in my ebook. I really feel like I could annotate this and like it would just be covered in highlights and tabs. Like, it was just so stunning. I really vibed with this character, and you know, this is her villain origin story, like her descent into evil, but I was fully on her side the whole way. Like, this made sense. Why she was angry, while she's thinking all these crazy things about these people, I was fully supporting every negative action she was taking towards these people, because honestly, they're awful and they've been getting away with it for too long. So if you want a book about a crazy woman doing just crazy things that, you know, you understand her crazy, this is the book for you. Like, I enjoyed this book so much. The main character is bisexual, so she's been with women, she's interested in men as well. There was an interesting romance developing as well, with this dude who is half monster, which I enjoyed. Go read this book. I really, really loved it. The next book I read was a reread, A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. And by the way, these two books, all three of these books were featured in a reading vlog that I just posted. So if you want really more in-depth thoughts and the moment of time that I did read it, you can go ahead and watch that and see a little bit of my beach trip as well. I enjoyed filming that. But I reread A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. I read this about 2 years ago from right now, and I listened to the audiobook originally, and sometimes when you listen to audiobooks I feel like you miss some things. I was pretty zoned in on this book when I was listening to it, but there was definitely some things that I missed. Like the last line of the book, I don't feel like I understood that the way that it is now. This book is about Felicity. She's at this boarding school called Dalloway. It's very prestigious. It's an all-girls school, blah blah blah. Senior year for her went bad because her best friend, also slash girlfriend, died that year, and she was the only one to witness the death, and they never found the body as well. So a lot of people are very suspicious of Felicity and think that she had something to do with the death. So this past year, she's been in a mental health facility working through the trauma of all of this, because this was a lot. But we pick up at the beginning of this book where she's giving senior year another go. She's gonna try again. Another interesting part about Felicity's time at the school is this school is well known for its history of witches. There was like 5 witches that all died in a very short time span towards the beginning of this school, and a lot of people think it's a myth. Felicity is not one of them. She thinks magic is real, and she thinks everything about this was real. So this year, there's another student named Ellis that has come in. She is a Pulitzer Prize winning author at a very young age, and she's decided she wants to write a book about the witches that died at this school. And she wants Felicity's help because Felicity has done a lot of research for it, because it was going to be her senior project when she originally was doing her senior year. These two characters, their dynamic, interesting. They're both very flawed people. I mean, once again, this is a book about villainous women. Like, I mean, you can see where they're coming from, but you can also be like, oh my god, you're crazy. But I enjoyed it. So they have an interesting romance dynamic blossoming in this book as well. Their interactions itself, like, this is what you're here for with the book. Like, the book, beautiful writing as well, but every scene with them was chaotic and messy because these characters, you don't fully understand them. Like, you don't fully know everything about them. Felicity herself is keeping secrets from the reader, so there's a lot to discover, and I don't know, towards the very end of the book, you still haven't learned a couple things that are like very integral to the book. And that part, I was giving this book a 4 stars both time that I read it. But once you hit that part of the book, it becomes a 5-star read because everything changes that you thought you knew. And it really shifts my thought process on this book. And the last line of the book in itself, the whole epilogue thing, I wish I had someone to discuss this with because I have theories on what she was saying here because it was very ambiguous, that ending, and I originally missed it, and now I think something else was going on here. So I might be crazy or I might be onto something. The next book I read is another horror. This one was a dark academia, but you know, there's horrific elements in it. This was a YA horror. Now we have an adult horror. Oh god, I loved this book. Monstruo by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This book was fantastic. I tabbed this and annotated, and I hadn't even read this book before, but I highlighted stuff. Of course, I can't find anything. I highlighted like I was highlighting things, multicolored highlighting to mean different things. I was enraptured by this book, captivated. It was so good. The original premise of this book is this mother and father, they lost their son. Something's wrong with his lung. That's really, we don't know like the full extent of his health problems other than he had an underdeveloped pair of lungs. He only had one lung, really. So he lived longer than they expected, but we begin this novel when he has just died. And these two characters, wife and husband, you know, that is awful. That's a terrible thing to experience together. And often you see in that sort of situation, the couple can either come together or drift apart. So this novel can dive into that a little bit. The interesting part is the female, Magos, the mother, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She decides to take a piece of her son's body and grow it. This is where the magical realism of this book comes in, because it's like, what? You're growing a piece of their body and it is morphing into a monster. But is this monster their son? That is a huge idea that you grapple with. But this book really dives into the monster of grief itself. It was just so beautifully done, and it takes place with 4 different perspectives. We start with the mother, then we have the best friend, and then we have the father, and then we have the monster. It was so freaking awesome. This book, why was I crying about a monster? Like, I did not expect to be so emotionally invested in this monster because it was a monster. Monsters do monstrous things, but I mean, once again, like it's just such an exploration of what you would do for love. Love can take you some nasty places sometimes. So, and grief can take you some nasty places as well. So it was just so unique, interesting. I mean, I've never read anything like it. This is probably one of the weirdest books I've ever read, but like so well done. The characters were so vivid. They felt all real, and I enjoyed how we got different takes on all of them. Like, I heard from all of them and they felt all super distinct from each other, especially the last perspective of the monster. I mean, I was disturbed the whole time, but I loved it. It was just fantastic. I mean, there is some gore in here, so if you can't handle that, just know that. But anyone that could handle it, maybe, like, I was never terrified or anything. I might have been a little disgusted here and there just because of the gory details that we would hear about sometimes. But the characters, I mean, I just want you to read about them. Every single character in this book was queer, so that was pretty cool as well. And we also had different locations. We were in Mexico, we were in New York, and then we went to Berlin, so we were in Germany. Very interesting. It was over a span of 7 years, many locations, different characters, and different ideas from all of them. Very unique book, and I will not be forgetting about this one. I feel like I would reread this one and get even more out of it the second time around. And the final book that I read, you might be like, what? But I'm telling you, this was, I had to read it. I felt a tug to read classic novels recently. I've discussed it a little bit in past videos. I have an English degree and I don't feel like I read a lot of classic novels, and I feel really disappointed by it, so I want to take it upon myself to read them myself, because I just thought I would have read more, and you know, here I am with the English degree and I've read short stories and that's pretty much it. So I read The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I always heard about how this one had intense queer undertones and how the author himself, I'm pretty sure it's confirmed, like he was a queer man. He was married to a woman, but he did have a trial for sodomy. I need to read back up more on it, but from what I remember, he had a really tragic ending, and it makes me really sad because time period, and I don't know, he was so talented. I mean, even if you weren't talented, you don't deserve that, but like it's even more of a sadness because it's like, wow, like he was such a talent, and I feel like he was getting therapy through writing things like this, because truly this book, I don't know how anybody ever read it and did not think it was queer. I mean, the way these men were talking about each other, that was the most romantic thing I've ever read in my life. So I don't know how anyone would have taken it otherwise, and this girl on Twitter told me that this book itself was used as a piece of evidence for his trial. So I could see how it would have been taken that way, and I guess people way back in the day, like, they just wouldn't have been thinking about queer people being real, that they just were trying so deeply to not see like how freaking intentional and romantic this book really was between the men. So if you don't know anything about Picture of Dorian Gray, it essentially is an exploration of the dangers of vanity. So there's this guy named Dorian Gray. He's really beautiful, stunning. Everyone thinks he's the most gorgeous person they've ever seen in their lives. And he is terrified of losing his youth because he feels like the only thing that anyone values in him is his beauty and his youth. So once he doesn't have that anymore, what is he? His friend Basil Hallward is a renowned painter, but there's something missing in his paintings. And he found that Dorian Gray is his muse, essentially. And the way he talks about Dorian Gray and how like he is, I mean, he idolizes him to such an extent level, and I mean, he makes him see a different part of life. It was so romantic the way Basil talked, or I don't know if people are gonna say Basil or Basil. I'm saying Basil. 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 Okay, basil. The way Basil, okay, the herb, but the way Basil was talking about Dorian Gray, I mean, it was the most stunning freaking paragraphs I've ever read in my life of someone talking about anybody. Like the way that Dorian Gray inspires him for his art, I mean, I would have just passed away if anyone had talked about me like that. So there's this guy, Lord Henry, ew. Ew to Lord Henry. Lord Henry finds out about how Basil has been painting Dorian Gray, and they end up having this portrait of just Dorian Gray himself. He's been painting Dorian Gray a lot as other figures, just as other things that are not himself. So one day he decides to do a portrait that is just him, and he puts all of himself into it, and he's too embarrassed to ever show anyone this painting really, because he feels like anyone that could see this painting would see the deep depths of emotion that he felt towards Dorian Gray. I'm like, what does that mean, you know, other than just you're gay, you know? Like, it very much felt like he was in love with Dorian Gray, and he put all of his love within this portrait. And Dorian Gray, I mean, this is a dynamic character. He started off one way, and then with the influences of other people like Lord Henry, he becomes a monster. He values nothing more than his youth and beauty the way that other people had viewed before him. And he is no longer caring about other people. He is no longer being a good person. It really is the corruption of valuing beauty above all else. I just really enjoyed how this was done, this painting. I mean, if you read the back here, it says, "If it were I who was to be always young, and the picture that was to grow old, for that I would give everything." There's this thing where he kind of makes a deal with the devil, where the picture, the portrait that Basil made him, will show his soul and show him withering away, but he himself will stay like immortal looking. But the price he has to pay for doing something like that is a huge, huge price. I mean, he is no longer the man that we knew. I thought this was stunning. 5 stars. Everything I've given here is 5 stars. Other than Late Bloomer. I'm sorry, Late Bloomer. You are still good too. I was grappling with what to give this, but honestly, like, the imagery, stunning. The emotions expressed, stunning. The ideals, the themes, beautiful. Like, I loved how this was done. It was genius. I mean, the only thing wrong with it was chapter 11, and I was warned that chapter 11 was really boring and not good. It was really boring. boring. I don't know. Like, that was the only chapter where I was like thrown out of it a little bit. Everything else, it was just such a interesting character study of a person over many, many years and what happens to them when they allow themselves to be corrupted by outsiders. Outside weirdos like Lord Henry. That's enough said about that. Those are the books that I read in June. I really had a lot to say about all of them, so I enjoyed discussing it with you today. Let me know if you've read any of these books. What did you read in June? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Did you give anything 5 stars? Let me know. Dang, I got the sun beaming. Everything's moving. I talked too long. Now I'm sweaty. So I'm just gonna go. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.